É um prazer estar aqui com um dos urbanistas mais influentes do mundo hoje, o Jan Gehl, um arquiteto dinamarquês que está aqui de visita a São Paulo. O Jan Gehl tem trabalhado há mais de 50 anos ajudando a transformar a lógica de várias cidades. Ele começou trabalhando na cidade natal dele, que é Copenhague, mas boa parte das grandes cidades do mundo seguiram a liderança de Copenhague. Hoje, talvez as ideias dele estejam entre as mais influentes para as novas gerações de urbanistas. E talvez essas ideias possam ser sintetizadas no título de um dos livros dele, que é Cidades para Pessoas. I was telling them that maybe your ideas could be synthesized in the title of one of your many books, which is Cities for People. What is it about that? Aren't all cities for people?
This particular book is actually a protest book against some dominating ideas of city planning or paradigms of city planning which have been very dominant in the second part of the 20th century. And one of them is modernistic city planning ideas, among them that cities are bad and freestanding buildings are good, streets are bad, putting buildings on grass is good, and also you must never put residence, workplace, recreation and transportation near each other, always separate, spread them out. That was some of the basic ideas. And these ideas, the first time they were really carried out in big scale for everybody to see, was in Brasilia. And that's why I call this idea basically for the Priscilla Syndrome. Brasilia is interesting because it looks fantastic from an airplane, it looks very interesting from a helicopter, and down where people are at eye level, it really does not look good at all. And the truth is, these guys, they never thought about people in the streets, people among the buildings. They just made the buildings, and then what was left between the buildings were leftovers. And then they started to call in some landscape artists, come and do landscaping. Then they looked out of the window to see if people were happy. They were not, because they were built completely different from the old cities. In the old cities, they always started with, there were a place where some people were walking, and then they put up little sheds along the path, and then after a while it became buildings, houses, and then you had a street. And so the old buildings were always starting with life, and then space, and then buildings, while the new ones was buildings first, and then landscaping, and then perhaps life, but actually never life, a never comfortable life. And it took us maybe 50 years to find out all the bad things about modernism, because all knowledge about people in cities was thrown out by the modernists. They say all the old stuff is not valid anymore. Now we have the modern man, everything should be different from everything else. But Homo sapiens is still this high. He's still a walking animal. We still have the same biological history. We still have a horizontal sense apparatus. We still can see only so far and so far. So all the basic things are the same, but now it's called modern man. But he kisses the same way, he looks at the girl the same way, he stands in the corners the same way. Everything is the same from Homo sapiens. So the only one which changed were the city planners, and it's taken us 50 years really to prove that that kind of city planning is not humanistic, it's not people-friendly, and we can do much better existing cities, we can repair them, and we can do much better new cities than Brasilia or than many of the stuff you can see here in Sao Paulo. And this is what I hope we increasingly can see. We really saw from around 2000 a change in paradigm, no more modernism, no more car invasion. Now we are striving around the world to make livable, sustainable and healthy cities, because this old city planning idea, it also was supported by motorism, by the cars, who should bring people from one to one to one. And that means that for 50 years we made city planning which invited people to sit all day. And now we know that that is a major problem for the health. These guys who have been sitting, and that's called the sitting syndrome, these guys who have been sitting, they live shorter, they go more to hospital, and they have a lousy old days because they have bad health in the old days, and they are much more costly for the health system. So we know that if people say have a little bit of exercise, 1 hour every day, they can live seven years more and have a much better quality of life and cost much less for the hospitals. So that's why we found in Copenhagen that every time a guy goes on a bicycle 1 kilometer, the society saves, I think it's 35 cents. And if he goes 1 kilometer in a car, the society loses 14 cents. So the more they bike, the more economic benefit for the society. Very interesting.
Even for people
and
who
a
don't
much
bike.
better city.
A better city, yeah. So there was also mental health, right? There was a big study, I think it was led by Harvard, and São Paulo, where we are now, is the world record bearer of mental illness. A lot of anxiety, a lot of stress, and a lot of panic. Do you think this has to do with the way the city was designed?
I can easily see a connection. And also, maybe I could mention why I, as an architect, became so interested in how the built form influenced the life. That was because very early in my career, actually right when I was finished, I married a psychologist, and she and her friends kept asking, why are you architects not interested in people? Why don't they teach you anything about people in university, in School of Architecture?
You know about buildings, you don't know about people.
And then, of course, in the days of the modernists, the days of Brasilia, they didn't thought that built form had anything to do with life. Life will go on, business as usual, but now they had modern buildings. But it's not so. Buildings have an enormous influence on the life. If two buildings are made with such a distance, and with such a distance, it's completely different situation down here. Here people meet the other people and it's intimate, whatever. Here they cannot even see to the other side of the space. So we know that built form has an enormous influence on the life and the quality of life. That's what we know now, and that is what we are applying now to cities and new towns worldwide. Personally, I'm very old, I'm 80, but I worked in this area for 50 years, and I've written one book after the other. This book, which is sort of the sum of what I know, came out 6 years ago, and already now it's out in 32 languages, from Indonesia to Greenland and to Japan and to Argentina. And I'm of course humbled and very happy to see that the interest is so great. But this distribution shows that all over the world people are very, very interested in coming to know more about how can cities be humanized, how can the day life for people in cities become better. That is why this book so quickly has been distributed.
And it's not only the books. Your firm has been hired by many of the biggest cities in the world, right? You've been working for New York, for London, for all big cities in Australia, and also for São Paulo too. Would you say that your ideas nowadays, you were talking about the paradigm, would you say that your ideas are more and more the new paradigm? Is it what new architects are studying at school?
It's still a transition period, and still there are many old guard who believe that form is everything. But I believe that good architect is not about form, because that is sculpture. Good architect is the interaction of form and life, and only if the interaction works well, and that this form supports life in the area and in the building well, is it good architecture. So architecture is now a wider thing. It's not only form, it's form plus life. And now we have worked hard to bring the life into the equation so that architecture students learn it is a combination, my friend. This one will give you machines for living. This one will give you cities with a soul.
You've been to Brazil quite a few times already, right? You've been here. Your firm has a big project in downtown São Paulo. You've been invited to talk a few times. I imagine that you had the opportunity to get to know some of our big cities. What are your impressions? Are Brazilian big cities made for people?
I've been here specifically to study Curitiba. And in a previous book, I wrote quite a bit about Curitiba and in a series of great cities around the world. I thought that what they've done in Curitiba is quite extraordinary. Also, I've been in Brasilia, and I wrote in this one why this is special. And I was not so happy there as I was in Curitiba. And then I had been in in Salvador, and in Rio de Janeiro, and now in Sao Paulo. I think that some of the cities are quite interesting, and all the cities have nice and interesting areas, but generally the quality of the Brazilian cities are not as good as the quality of cities in, say, Sweden or something like that, because the market forces have been too strong here. The automobile industry have pushed cars into the cities, and the developers have gone on doing all these quick buildings without thinking so much about whether it would be a good city if you had more towers. Generally, it will not be a good city. You have to know why you're doing it. And what is most important in city planning, you have to know where you're going. So all the good cities I know of, they have a very specific plan. By 2020 we'll be here, by 2030 we'll be here, by 2040 we have no more fossil fuels, and by 2050 we are here. So so there is these plans to gradually change the direction instead of going on with business as usual. It's so important that you have leadership and that you have visions and that you have goals to meet, and you know where will this city be going. And this I could challenge all the Brazilian cities, actually all cities in the world, to have these goals, because we can't go on using fossil fuel, polluting the air, challenging the climate, and being more and more fat, and having a lousy life, and being afraid of each other. We have to address these things which are vital for the well-being of Homo sapiens.
If you follow public debate about cities here in Brazil, in São Paulo specifically, you will listen to lots of people who will tell you, okay, bikes are cool, they're cute, Copenhagen is incredible, but São Paulo is not Copenhagen. There are 100 times more people here, and you can see it. It's a place with a lot more urgent social problems and with less money. Why bother? São Paulo is so far away from Copenhagen. Why trying?
It's not about Copenhagen at all. It's about Homo sapiens. And I gather that there are Homo sapiens living here also. And these kind of humanistic city planning ideas, they can be used on all levels, from a little village of 100 people to a big city in Africa of 30 million people, or Tokyo. And it's not about copying Copenhagen, because for every city there will be specific solutions. The only thing we know is that the motor car is on its way out. Driving is going down in America and Australia. Public transportation is on its way up around the world. Bicycling also is on the way up around the world, because it is very smart to climate and to health. So there's a number of things changing, and we know that we have to find new ways of mobility, because the old idea of mobility of the motor car, that every individual have 4 rubber wheels and that will give you mobility, that is not true in cities. It's really a horrible mode of mobility in dense cities. It's technology which is far outdated, and we're just going on blindly. And I think that in just 25 or 20 years, we'll see rapid and drastic changes in the way we organize mobility in cities, because what we do now is not smart, and having more of that doesn't make us twice as happy, it makes us twice as unhappy. So we will see changes, and we'll be forced to see changes, because the climate are not waiting, and the health problem is not waiting for a solution. We have to address these.
Do you have any advice for mayors and for people who are designing city all over Brazil? You know the problems of our cities. Not all cities will be able to hire your firm. So what should they think about? How should they deal with their space?
Maybe I should say that my firm is one thing and my research is another thing. We talk about changing the way people think. And all my 6 books in all these 35 languages, they are all made to change the way we think. And then at some point, 15 years ago, so many mayors come and say, you can criticize, but can't you come and show? Then we made the company. And the company, they tried to put some of these ideas into real life. And we have worked in very interesting cities like Moscow, like New York, London, Melbourne, Sydney, Rotterdam, Copenhagen, Riga, Zurich, 200 cities around the world. And many, many interesting things have been made. Also, they worked here. I have the impression that there are not so many things to look at here yet, but maybe they will come.
Yeah.
So there are more things in New York to look at. More things even more things in Moscow, which have been completely transformed.
Really? So Moscow is changing fast.
You wouldn't imagine it. But that's because they have strong leadership in Moscow. Mayors say, you do this, they do.
Yeah.
No discussion.
So your firm has a project here in São Paulo, in one very symbolic area of downtown São Paulo, which is Anhangabaú Valley.
Yeah.
And the project has been a bit polemic. Some people have been accusing it of helping gentrification of the area. How would you respond to that?
The sure way of preventing gentrification is to make things as bad as possible and don't do anything. And to me, that's not a solution. If we have a possibility to make the world, if we have a drug in a doctor's toolbox which can cure people, I think we should give it to the people instead of holding it back and say, maybe most of the drugs will go to the rich people. We have to do as best we can. And this gentrification system, the problem is we shall make more nice places. So there are nice places for all of us, whether we are in one or another or certain economic layer in the population. So gentrification is not a matter which the city planners shall solve. That has to be solved politically by making rules that there shall be mixed use, there shall be affordable residences in every district and things like that. It's not about making it as bad as possible. Never.
Another thing you see a lot in the public debate here in Brazil is people saying that, you know, a city like São Paulo is too big to fail. You can't keep experimenting things. The city has to go on. You can't treat people as lab mice. You can't use experimentation. The city is the way it is. You have to let it function. How would you respond to that?
You don't have to experiment anymore, because this humanistic movement of city planning, which I've been talking about, has been around now for 20 years and has been utilized in a number of big cities, among them New York. And so it's not pioneering to do something like this. It is something which you can learn about, and there are pioneers all other places, so you don't have to be a pioneer. If you don't do anything, you're lacking behind. That's the problem.
It was a big pleasure to talk to you. I wish I had more time. I don't, unfortunately.
I wish I had more voice.